In this video, I'm going to cover how trauma affects our relationships, signs that your trauma is affecting your relationships or your dating life, and why it's so hard to overcome, as well as how we can simplify the process in understanding our trauma and actually going about healing it. We are back with another car session filming, and it is probably about 80 to 85 degrees in here. So we'll see how long my phone lasts in this heat and how long I last. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. My name's Isabelle, and I help you understand yourself so you can feel more clarity and control over your life. Now, before I dive into today's video talking about how trauma affects our relationships and how we can work through that, make sure you hit the link in the description below to book your coaching call, your reading now, where we dive into your unique personality and find solutions to the areas of life you're struggling with. And if dating is something you're struggling with right now and you would really like some personalized solutions, then book a reading where we dive deep and get you the fulfillment you're looking for. So in this video, for people who are just having it in the background and not looking at the screen, what I'll cover in this video is what is trauma, how everyone has trauma, and it's called programming, how I discovered my own trauma, which is through the Enneagram, steps to heal your trauma and date better, and bonus tools, which is for going deep into trauma using breath work. If you feel like you're repeating cycles in dating, no one wants to date you, like your trauma is getting in the way of your dating experience, like you're never loved no matter how loving your partner is, then this video is for you. So enjoy. Because oftentimes I think we can all feel like we recognize our wounds, our struggles, our limitations, whether it's big traumas or even just personality faults, which are really the same thing, which I'll get into later. But then to figure out how to heal it and fix it is a whole nother story, which is what I was talking to my friend about recently. So if you're feeling like you're just repeating the same cycles in your relationships, if you keep ending up with the same kind of gals or guys who end up just always cheating on you or not being reliable, if you feel like you cannot find a good person out there, if you're struggling with feeling like no one likes you for who you are, no matter how many good qualities you have in dating, and if you feel like even if you're in good relationships and you never feel loved, or if you feel like you're in a relationship and you just feel like you're not fulfilled, which is something I know resonated for a lot of people in one of my recent videos. If you feel like you're in a relationship and you just don't feel good in it, even though it's a good relationship, then your trauma's in the way. And this video is for you. So, and if you want to listen on to this video, but if you want to just stick with the personalized solutions and figure out, because everyone has different trauma. They're generally 9 different types, but for everyone it plays out slightly different. There's really more closer to 27 different kinds of traumas. So if you want to just learn about yours and heal it, then book a reading. But I felt inspired to film this video today because I was talking to a friend of mine who will keep anonymous. I can't speak English. But she was saying how she really wants to be in the dating world, and recently went through a bad situation that I was, to be honest, not very clear on, because this is a more distant friend of mine. But she was saying how she really just didn't have good experiences dating. Now she wants to have better ones, but no matter what, she still feels like her trauma is getting in the way of her finding a good partner and not sabotaging the relationship, frankly. She feels like in her own way that she's like, as much as she may be finding the wrong people, she's also getting in the way personally from being a good person in her relationships. And she's very aware of what her trauma is, but she doesn't know what to do with it. She's feeling very frustrated because she doesn't know how to heal it or what to do about it. She just keeps repeating the same patterns. And that is something that I can even understand for myself, you know, like that feeling of, I do not have big trauma, first and foremost. But interesting fact that I heard is that trauma is stored in the body and brain the same way, no matter how big or small it is. So that's why I like Gabby's approach here at Be the Hero Academy to explaining trauma, which is everyone has trauma, but think of it more as the word programming. The word trauma gets thrown around a lot nowadays. And so we can feel like we're either super identified with the fact that we are traumatized, or we feel like I don't want to admit that I have trauma because so many people have it worse than me. Everyone has programming. Like the software of a computer is not just the tangible physical part of it. It has to have a software program in order for it to function. And we have the same thing. We take our negative experiences from childhood and hardwire it into our brains to avoid any form of rejection or any form of abandonment in order to be loved. And that programming creates our personality. Our beliefs, our trauma create our personality. If you had an experience in an extreme where you maybe had an abusive parent, and I don't know if I'm supposed to be giving a trigger warning on this video that's occurring to me. I feel like just if we're watching a video on trauma, you have been warned. But in an extreme, if you had a parent who was abusive, you're going to try to be a passive person to avoid any sort of harm. And that makes you into a passive person going throughout life. So that is, I think, a simple example of just how programming and trauma can play out and make our personality. And I'll get more into this later in the video. And so that experience with my friend really inspired me to make this video. On top of it, I know that I felt, as I was saying, that my own personality has really limited me, and my own trauma, so to say, my programming, has limited me in my dating experiences. It's made me go for unavailable people who I knew were going to fail me. It's made me go for people who maybe I felt heard by, but were not compatible. It's made me go for people who were not truly interested in me or who were going to use me. And I keep hearing this even more too, this idea of how our trauma is getting in the way, with another friend too, ironically, the same day, who's telling me they're, opening their options because of they feel like no one appreciates their love, even though they try so hard. And that's a very understandable thing. And keeping an open mind is not a bad thing. But I always invite people to question their dating choices, including my own, from the idea of, are we truly healed? Because we don't always make the best choices from an unhealed place. And so that really affects our decisions. This wound, our trauma, in the end, if we do not heal our traumatic wound from our childhood, our programming, we're constantly going to make decisions to affirm that belief because it keeps us safe. As long as we affirm, basically, like I said, our trauma is our hardware, our software, and it keeps the world structured for us. And so, of course, we're going to go about life doing things that affirm that. And on top of it, if we're looking for a sense of just healing that, then we're basically seeking our desires based off of our trauma rather than our deepest desires or our truest desires or our highest selves desires. So if these people's experiences, if my experiences that I've been describing sound familiar, then listen on so that you can understand how I've personally healed this trauma, which I can say the work is never done. But you can get a lot of it out of the way and a lot of it done. There's always little bits that can resurface, and I have to crack my door because it is warm and I can see my screen darkening. So I'm going to see if that keeps my phone from turning off while I'm filming. So if this sounds familiar, if this sounds like something you're going through, watch on so you can learn how I've dealt with this and what I can, suggest or recommend based off of my own experience. Because as much as my trauma has, I just don't like using the word trauma, as much as my programming has gotten me into not so great dating experiences, it's also helped me find better dating experiences. And that's where it's a 50-50, So, for example, my very first dating experiences were, frankly, really bad. In the sense of, I was just basically throwing myself on people to seek a sense of validation for who I wanted to be seen as, or just being seen in general. However, I did, as I recently made videos on after those, get into a really healthy, good relationship with someone who I loved. He was great, and that relationship ended, which shows how it's not just traumatized or not traumatized. It's a scale, and the more you work through it, the more we can find relationships that are fulfilling. So it's an ongoing process. And so that is one note I want to make that my friend asked me when she was saying, like, do I have to heal this all now before I find a good relationship? And I said, yes, but no. You know, the more you can still date before you do the work, but know that the more work you do, the better of a relationship you will be open to, because you will have healed yourself and not need that healing from someone else. If you seek the healing from someone else, you're likely going to find someone who's not going to be a good fit with your personality, but instead is fitting to your wound. So in a way, it's like it's fitting with your inner child, but not who you've grown to be. They'll become outdated, which is something I very much felt in my last relationship, where he was so fulfilling for that inner child in me that just wanted to be seen and heard and loved. But then there's these grown parts of me that I've learned and have become a part of me later in life that weren't fitting with him. Hence why my relationship ended. But so I already kind of talked about what trauma is. And again, I want to remind you guys that trauma is programming and everyone has it. So if you have big trauma to work through, that is definitely going to be something that plays a role in what kind of relationships you feel safe in. You will likely feel safe with someone who reminds you of your, what's the right word? Let's say attacker. Attacker sounds really intense, but overall, we receive, our programming comes in, so we are backing up to understand trauma even better. Our programming is formed primarily in the first 7 years of life and then the 7 years after. So until we're 14. A lot of it is formed when we are up 0 to 7. So then if you don't have any severe trauma from that age, then you will have a lot less to work through, frankly. But you will have a personality that is formed. You'll have the basis of a personality, and then the next 7 years will indicate which way you go. In a way, you can kind of think of it as the first 7 years form whether you're going to be a very active, assertive person, so to say, or a very passive personality. Something like that. And then there's more branches off of that in the next 7 years. Our teen years, or our middle school years, so to say, really do form a lot of our personality, which shows, like, for example, up until I was probably 10 years old, I was a very enthusiastic child. And then I made friends with people who were more outgoing and needed a lot of attention, because their first 7 years were tainted by a feeling of you don't see me enough, given that they were in a busy school system with busy parents. And so then I took on a more passive personality, which became someone who believes they have to be easy in order to be loved. But before that, you would have never thought I would be a passive person. Anyway, so that's an example. And then another note, again, is this wound for me was not based off of my parents, which is why I say attacker earlier, because it is not, we don't just form our traumas based off of our parents. While it can play a role, because these people are very important in our lives, especially in the first 7 years of our life, there's also, our wounds can be based off of society, siblings, relatives, anyone who is close in our life or important in our life up until we're about 14. So this plays out in our dating because we take that belief with us wherever we go. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that software does not go away. We're seeking someone to heal that or see that even. We want to be seen for our trauma because we felt we could never express it. Though, I don't know why there's a black mark on my hand. I just noticed that right now and I got distracted for a minute there. But, so once you know you kind of have a trauma, it can be hard to identify exactly what it is. And then on top of it, we can get pulled into a lot of traps, especially with how much stimulus there is in society about, okay, which label do we put on it? Do we put, am I a highly sensitive person? Am I a people pleaser? Everyone feels like a people pleaser because all of our programmings make us feel, how do I say this right? Everyone feels like a people pleaser, and everyone's going to relate to a people pleaser in some way because we create our personality on the basis of being liked by other people, so we are not threatened for our primal sense of security. And so everyone's going to relate to people pleaser, but I've found the way for me to help me identify my programming the most, my wounds, is the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a personality system consisting of 9 types that show us specifically the 9 core childhood wounds that we can struggle with. And I've met a lot of people through my work, through my travels, through just living life, and everyone relates to one of these 9. It doesn't matter if you feel like you're somewhere in between. I find that if you just pick one and identify one that resonates the most, we can find a lot of healing through it. So if you are concerned about being boxed into one type, just let it be a tool for helping you identify parts of your wounds rather than having to be your identity. So I'll briefly go over really quick what the 9 core wounds are, and you can close your eyes and think about which of these resonates the most for you, for your childhood self, for your trauma, and also see if it shows up in your relationships that you've gone through so far or in dating. 1, I have to be perfect in order to be loved. 2, I have to be selfless and helpful in order to be loved. 3, I have to be the best in order to be loved. 4, I have to be important and unique in order to be loved. 5, I have to be capable and knowledgeable in order to be loved. 6, I have to be loyal and protective in order to be loved. And the world is naturally going to harm me. That belief of the world is dangerous and it's going to harm me, people are going to betray me, is very strong for the 6. 7, I have to be fun and positive in order to be loved. 8, I have to be strong and assertive in order to be loved and protected. And 9, I have to be easy and carefree in order to be loved. So think about those and write down the number I said with it, because the Enneagram types are related. They're labeled after each number simply. They have names along with it. So for example, the 1 is the perfectionist, but usually if someone asks what's your Enneagram, or if you're going to look it up, you can just look up Enneagram 1, Enneagram 2, Enneagram 3, and so on. I am an Enneagram 9, which means I believe I have to be easy in order to be loved. And this has shown up, that belief was formed in my childhood with my friends, feeling like I couldn't be seen because they needed all the attention on them because they felt so unseen. They were likely Enneagram 4s and Enneagram 6s and Enneagram 1s who felt like they weren't seen. And so then I took on the passive role, and this showed up in my relationships by me being a shapeshifter, changing my personality and making space for them. And on top of it, I was waiting for that wound to be affirmed, that proved to me that I get to be seen, I get to take up space. Let me be my 7-year-old self again, which is what happened in my most recent relationship. I finally got that validation, but I could have been giving it to myself a long time ago. So knowing your Enneagram wound, how does that help you? This is already an 18-minute video, so I'm trying to wrap it up faster. Knowing your Enneagram wound, how does that help you with dating? Once I could identify my type, I could write out and think about and notice how that showed up in my relationships, basically how I was being my Enneagram in my previous dating experience, and how I was seeking for my wound to be affirmed. I felt I needed to be easy to be loved, and so I could write out how I was letting that person affirm, oh, you don't have to be that. Because oftentimes we think we find true love and chemistry when our wound is affirmed, which is not necessarily a fully bad thing. We want people who love us and make space for us, but notice if you're waiting for someone else to affirm that wound for you rather than letting that go for yourself and healing that for yourself. So how do we heal our trauma? Using the Enneagram makes it simple, and it has for me at least, to identify my wound, notice when it comes up, and just simply repeating it to yourself. You know, I can go notice when it surfaces for me and go basically by catching it and going, oh, there's my Enneagram wound again, thinking I need to be passive and harmonious in order to be loved. And then affirming to myself, I don't have to. I can do whatever I want right now. So what do I want to do? And sometimes that meant being extremely loud and outgoing at times. And other times it is truly just, you know, I actually feel like taking a back seat right now. I know I don't have to, but I want to. So when I could identify my wound, I could then pause and go, what do I want to do instead? And so this is where healing trauma, while we can do some deep work, which I will get into how to do the deep work in a minute, there's another tool to use. Simply just becoming aware of our wound and catching it is the most important thing we can do for our healing our trauma, which is why it's an ongoing process in dating. It's not just unhealed and healed. It takes actively, constantly noticing it. When I first got into my 1-year relationship, I was very aware of my wounds and traumas, but as I got more comfortable, I let my trauma, so to say, my programming take the wheel. And that is one note I want to make about the Enneagram. We do not change Enneagram types. We may change our behaviors, but the wound and programming, which was formulated in the first 14 years of our life, never goes away. It is our software that we're with forever. Just like we can get updates on our computer, we may be able to update our programming, but we can never fully get rid of it, which means that we can have positive expressions rather than negative expressions. For example, I am still a 9. I can go instead be like, you know what? I appreciate that I'm going to be easygoing. I'm going to make sure I create space for myself in my relationships and in my own life. So then I don't feel the need to find someone who makes me feel that I can take up space. And instead I can give that to myself. But I still just love that I'm going to be an easygoing person who's harmonious, doesn't rock the boat, and can help people feel seen and heard because I know what it's like to feel unseen and unheard. So that's how it plays out for me. And then maybe through this process, you can figure out how your Enneagram plays out for you as well. And if you want to learn more about how to do that book or reading, in the link in the description below. But the other way, if you have more severe trauma and you feel like you need to let it go on a deeper level rather than just catching it, I highly recommend holotropic breath work. The reason is because trauma, while it's something we think of as mental, it is also stored physically. And you can think of it simply this way. My phone died, and so I'm borrowing my sister's. So it didn't die. It actually overheated. Hence why I said it's hot in here. So I guess an 18-minute video is about the set point. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up faster, but this is still really important. Here's how trauma gets stored, not only in the brain, but in the body. If you have a shocking experience, such as a car accident, or just anyone yelling at you, you know, that feels like trauma, we can basically feel like, so what happens, I got a little distracted because my brother was pointing at me or something. What happens is our brain signals with our neurons that there's an attack, signaling then our sympathetic stress state, our sympathetic nervous system. Stress is triggered, cortisol is boosted. We shoot out all these chemicals, but our neurons don't just, fire in our brain. Our body, gets rigid. It's ready for an attack. And so it signals into our physical bodies. When we have a traumatic experience emotionally, when our Enneagram wound is triggered first in childhood, and every time we have an experience going forward that affirms, see, this is why you need to be this Enneagram, we are then sending the signals to the body to harbor that. So I think that explains enough how our trauma affects our bodies. But given that, with this being stored in our bodies, we can heal it physically, which is why I love holotropic breathwork, which Gabby, Robin, and Victor at Be the Hero Academy do live events all over the US teaching. So if you go to Be the Hero Academy on Instagram, I think that is the best way to keep in touch with where they're doing these events. But we also have digital events that we do on the Academy, our membership, in the link in the description below, Be the Hero Academy, where you can do it and learn how to do holotropic. Basically, it's a style of breathing that hyperoxygenates the body and takes all that crystallized, stuck energy, that the nervous system is basically constantly poking at your body, making it feel stuck and stiff, and releases it. So it's a way basically to breathe out the trauma. And if you don't think that's true, and if you don't think that it'll actually help you, try it, and I guarantee you're going to be shocked at how much comes out. I've seen a lot of emotional experiences for people, and I've experienced that for myself even too. Doing holotropic breath work has really helped me release the emotions stored in my body, because literally our brain is connected to our body through our nerves. And so basically, with us constantly affirming these traumatic beliefs triggering our stress state, we form stuck energy in our bodies. And this is why we say, like, based off of my theory is that based off of our Enneagram, people have certain physical builds. For example, 6s tend to be really puffy, so to say, in their chest, or hunched in their chest, because they feel that their heart chakra, or their heart's energies, their ability to let things in and out of their heart, because their heart has been hurt, they feel stuck. And so their nerves are just clenching everything around them and forming a protective layer. For those who are Enneagram 4s, they tend to carry more weight through their waist and hips because they're trying to protect their sacral chakra, where their sense of self-worth is. They're trying to protect their sexuality, so to say, and so on. 9s tend to be hypermobile because they feel that they have to be bendable to other people's needs, and so they don't have a lot of structure holding them. The point is, holotropic has been really helpful for me healing my trauma and releasing it from the physical, but we also have to do this mental work as well. So in conclusion for this video, I recommend that after this you take out a pen and paper and actually ask yourself, 1, what Enneagram type do I think I am? How have my traumatic wounds, what were my traumatic wounds in my childhood, and what are some experiences that I've had in my previous life and recent life that I use to affirm these beliefs? How has my Enneagram showed up in my dating? What were my partners like, and how is that related to my Enneagram? Were they people that affirmed my Enneagram belief and made me feel seen and heard? How can I heal this wound in myself? Actually one point that really helped me was asking myself, if I were my perfect partner, how would I heal my own wound? What do I expect my partner to do to make me feel healed, seen, heard, understood? And how can I give that to myself? Because contrary to popular belief, we are everything we've been looking for. And as much as it's nice to have a partner, we can give ourselves all the emotional needs that we need, and most of the physical. We can't, sometimes we just really crave a good hug, and we can't, that'd be a little creepy if we give that fully to ourselves, but we still need a level of physical human touch for emotional, or for our health. But for the most part, we can fulfill all our needs. And so if you want help if this video was helpful for you, and you feel like you want to go deeper into understanding your wounds, and you want help going through your trauma and your wounds so that you can fully release them and enter the dating field from a healed place and find the right partner, then I highly please recommend book a reading in the link in the description below, where we will dive deep into your trauma, your wounds, and your personality, so you can understand not only what your wounds are that are holding you back in your dating life, but what kind of dating values you should be living in line with based off of your unique personality. There are other personality systems that show us what our true dating needs and relationship needs, which turns out are two separate things, what they are. And so by understanding these, you can have somewhere to move to as you're moving away from seeking out your trauma needs. So book a reading in the link in the description below, and join Be the Hero Academy, which is our free group membership where you can stay in touch with us and share your journey, and join us for our daily lives where we help you stay motivated on your path towards healing and being the hero of your life rather than the victim. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and let me know in the comments below if this video resonated for you. Once again, my name's Isabelle. It is hot in here. From my heart to yours, namaste. Bye.